this book. And also because the writer is from Monterey County, and we've had amazing interns with Red Cross over the years that worked with us and have done amazing jobs. And so Michael has traveled quite a bit all over the world, and he talks about food as a way of identity in cultures. And when refugees become refugees, when civilians become refugees, they sometimes lose their identity or their culture because they're moved to a totally different place. And food is a wonderful connector. And what I was most touched by was his book, which shared a number of recipes, shared his experience of overseas, and his working in conflict zones. And I'm so excited that he agreed to speak today. And I'm so happy. I'm always going to ask those of you who've been to these webinars before know me, and I warned him ahead of time. I'm going to ask him what he thought he wanted to be when he was in high school.
Okay.
And Michael, wait, I need to see your face while you're talking about this.
Oh, wait. Okay. Let me, how to.
You don't have to show the slideshow yet. Yes.
Oh, okay. Could you see me now?
We'd love to see you talk for just a little bit, if that's okay.
That mean... Okay.
Oh, also, Michael,
sure.
If you want, I can show it for you too, if you want.
Oh, did you get access to it?
Yes, I did. I have.
Okay, great. I'll let you do it then. Great.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, what did you think you were going to be when you graduated from high school?
You know, honestly, I was on a path to becoming a physician, I believe. Well, first off, I want to thank everyone for coming. This is great. And thank you for the Red Cross for hosting me. It's really an honor to be here. But yeah, as a high school student, my entire family are basically physicians or nurses or in public health. And I was kind of on a path to be that. But when I was in college, right before college, I remember reading about the Rwandan genocide. And I was actually at a dentist's office, and I picked up a Time magazine. And in there was a several-page story about what happened in Rwanda. And I just couldn't believe that something like that had happened. The numbers and the violence, it shocked me to my core. And I couldn't believe this. I thought I was reading some sort of fake news. It really kind of sparked my interest in international affairs and politics. And I just started reading voraciously on different conflicts that were happening. The Bosnia-Herzegovina, the Balkans War was happening at the same time. And I just got very fascinated by it. And one thing in particular, this group of people who were kind of inserting themselves in between the warring parties to kind of negotiate the end of the war, like Richard Holbrooke, for example, or Gian Domenico Pico. I really got fascinated by these individuals who were risking it all to kind of end wars. And I thought it was such a really kind of noble and a noble profession. And I kind of switched from that into more focused on looking at human rights issues. I mean, my parents raised my brother and sister and I to have this kind of public service attitude. My parents treated their jobs very much like, being a nurse and a physician. Well, it was a profession, but they treated it as a public service in many ways, and they instilled that in my brother and sister and I. And I'll be very frank. It was a tough conversation with my parents, particularly my father, who really wanted his eldest son to follow in his footsteps to be a doctor, and shifting over to international human rights career. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it was a worthwhile one in the end. But really, in high school, I thought I was going to be a doctor. And then I know it was, Rwanda, and then just deep diving into trying to satisfy this intellectual curiosity about the world. And the rest is history in some ways.
It's wonderful. And what was your journey? How did you start off getting into human rights and international? What was your path to where you are now?
So in college, I studied Japanese. Well, let me just kind of back up a little bit. In many ways, my my journey into kind of international human rights started as a child. If I'm looking back, my father speaks several languages. He's kind of a magician in that way. He speaks Sindhi, Urdu, Farsi, English, and we used to be dragged to these Christmas parties as kids and in Cleveland, Ohio, and it was a bunch of South Asian doctors. My father's from Sindh in Pakistan, and they were all conversing in these languages, and I was like, "This is incredible! I want to have these magic powers." And I kept asking my dad for them. I'm like, "Dad, can you teach me Sindhi? Can you teach me your language?" And he's like, "No, you don't need it. You're an American kid growing up in Ohio. Forget it. Like, your mother doesn't speak it. It's just too hard for me to teach it to you." And we would also, during my childhood, we'd often be in Pakistan. And my cousins, well, they're wonderful people. As kids, they picked on me all the time as the American kid, and they picked on me in another language I couldn't understand. And so I like would pester my dad again. I'm like, "Dad, you got to teach me Sindhi. I want to be able to fight back. Like I want to even the playing field." And he's like, "Nope, I'm a doctor. It's too difficult. You don't need it." And the brushback was tough, but I understood. Like he made sense. But the language bug never really left me. I ended up studying Japanese in college intensively. I took actually a large part of my senior year off of college to go study Japanese intensively in Japan, and I just kind of absolutely fell in love with the language and not just the Japanese language, but the learning a language itself was just a really fascinating and intellectually challenging and kind of morally and kind of like satiating process. But after college, I went back to Japan for another few years to teach English, but I kept studying Japanese intensively. And one night, I walked into this tiny little Japanese bar, this izakaya, in the small little fishing village I was living in. I was one of the only few foreigners living there. And I um, just became really close with the single mom who ran this little izakaya. And I became her, her surrogate son, and she gave my Japanese mother. And, she's like, I was in there every night on both sides of the bar, drinking in the front and washing dishes in the back on busy nights. But on slow nights, when I was there, she got really worried that I was living alone, and so that must mean I wasn't eating very well. So she taught me how to cook. And one night, it was a weekday night. I'm standing over her shoulder, watching her how to cook her old family recipes in her language, and I'm listening to her in her language. But I had this wave of guilt wash over me. And here I was doing this in her language, studying her culture, and I didn't know anything about my own language and my culture. And it set me on this path to really kind of understand it as an adult. And after I went back to Japan, I was getting ready to go to the Monterey Institute, Middlebury Institute. Went back to Ohio. I was getting ready to drive across the country to California. And I started talking to my dad again just about language issues. And, my dad and I hadn't seen each other in a while, and I was in Japan for those years, and we started reconnecting over a course of a few summer nights. And we started talking, and he started telling me about Pakistan and his childhood. And he started telling me things I hadn't heard before about him as a child. He had survived the partition of India and Pakistan as a child. He was about 13 years old when India and Pakistan split. And I mean, I think many of you on this call will know kind of the genocidal violence that took place when the British cleaved those two countries in half. And my father experienced a lot of it. And he started over the course of several nights in the summer, he started telling me these stories about partition. And I could see that it was like this, the violence was like this mountain range and on his mind, like ever, it's always on the horizon, it never disappeared. And we turned back to the issue of language again. And I asked him, Dad, like, why didn't you teach us Sindhi? Because I felt there was something deeper there. And he said to me, he's like, listen, even if I could teach you Sindhi, it was too painful for me to do it. Everything that I had seen during partition and those years afterwards, that violence, I lost a lot of friends. It it fused onto the parts of my culture that I really loved and just became too painful for me to teach it to. He's like, not that those other reasons I gave you weren't the truth. There was this other one as well. And in that moment, I saw this, actually, I felt this tentacle kind of reach down through history and steal my language from me, like was stealing my culture from me. Like 70 years after that violence, it was still affecting families like mine. Fast forward, I'm in Afghanistan, and I was working for Human Rights Watch at the time. My job then was investigating civilian casualties uh, as a result of NATO and US airstrikes, as well as Taliban operations. And so I spent a lot of time moving around the country, interviewing victims of this violence. And I'd often do my interviews over a meal. And I had seen a lot of different parts of Afghanistan over that time. I'd eaten a lot of different food, but the cuisine always, what I was served in many ways was always kind of a version of the same thing. And there was a bit of a monotony to what I had been seeing around Afghan food culture. One night, a dear friend of mine invited me over, an Afghan man invited me over for dinner. His name was Tamim. And Tamim, like many Afghans, had been a refugee many times in his life. He had um, been a refugee in Pakistan, he had been a refugee in Iran, and eventually was able to get to Europe and then the United States. But like many Afghans, after the American invasion, he came back to rebuild. And Tamim is just an excellent cook too. And he had served this meal one night, and there was this beautiful chickpea curry that he made. And I hadn't seen it before in all the years I've been in Afghanistan. And I asked him, is this Afghan? It was kind of an arrogant question. How could you know in a country's cuisine after only a few years there? And he said to me, yes, it is Afghan. And the reason why you haven't seen it before is because of the war. And this dish is not something you would normally see in restaurants. It's something that people cook at home. And we started talking about the reasons why Afghanistan was at war in the first place. And he started telling me about memory. He started telling me about how generations of Afghans had been killed or had been left the country, and how, like, imagine when you're getting ready to leave home and may never come back, you're going to take your most precious things with you. And Afghans did that with their culinary knowledge. And like he told me, and I'll never forget this, that the war had narrowed Afghanistan's language of food. And so people were forgetting how to make these very unique dishes like the one that we're eating. And it just became this, it struck me, right? I felt that same tentacle that I reached down and stole my language from me, was stealing Afghanistan's culinary culture, kind of one recipe at a time. And from that moment on, I kind of, everywhere I went, I started asking how the violence I was investigating, either with Human Rights Watch or with the United Nations, whether it was in Sri Lanka, Afghanistan, Syria, Myanmar, I would ask how the violence that I was investigating was changing the culture, how it's changing the food. And many times, like I was saying, I did these interviews over meals when you're actually in in interviewing someone who was a victim of a war crime or genocide or eyewitnesses. So you're asking them to recount the worst moments of their life often. And like I said, I often did these over a meal. And it it gave us the meal did many things. And this is the wonderful thing about food, is that it gave us something to focus on outside the violence for a moment when the conversations got very difficult and painful. And we started talking about food, and I would often bring up that question, like, how is the war changing the food? And people just had these incredible stories, and it took us down these paths into their lives, into the culture, into the history of the place. And I remember hearing from so many people about family recipes that were being lost, and they spoke about it. And recall, like, we're talking about, like, they spoke about it in terms of which recipes were disappearing from their families or their villages or their towns, like losing a family member. And I remember this one time that I'm having one of these conversations, and out the door was UNESCO helping to rebuild an old mosque. And UNESCO was spending hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of dollars repairing this old mosque, which was an incredibly important thing for that community and for humanity. But here we are, I've been hearing these stories about recipes disappearing, this very basic facet of human culture being lost, and realizing there's no protection for it in times of conflict. And so I kind of been on this effort to put food culture on par with other forms of culture and getting it protected in war. And so um, I like, and part of this process was just asking people that question: how is the violence changing the cuisine? And people would give me recipes all the time. They would rip notebooks out of my hand and have me write down, or my translator, and have me write down recipes so they wouldn't be lost to take them out of the war zone. And it just became this. It became this really kind of incredible way to see the impact of violence on us and our community, on our shared communities and our shared values around the world. But also, I found it to be a really powerful way um, to tell a story about how a community is losing its food culture, but also the incredible people trying to keep it alive in real time, as a way to talk about the beauty of people and places that are so often overlooked, that don't make it on the front page of the New York Times. By just raising that question, how is the violence changing the food culture? You get people to think a little bit differently, and food offers this really an easier entry path into tougher subjects. And so that's really the basis of the Last Sweet Bite. It's a bit of a travelogue of my time working in conflict zones, memoir of my family, and cookbook. A lot of the recipes that people ask me to take out of the war zones to preserve, to keep them alive, as a way for all of us to see it, are in that book. So it's a long way of kind of telling you a little bit about the book, but does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Eloquently. Thank you so much, Michael.
No problem, no problem. I really
Yep.
enjoy this.
What else do you want to say? What else is important for you to share with this
Yeah,
group?
I think, so a little bit about the book in many ways is, I mean, I've heard some people that are definitely interested in international humanitarian law, and that is something that I worked on quite a bit with Human Rights Watch, the UN, and other organizations. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Some of the goals of what I'm trying to do with this project. Like I said, I find food to be an easier entry point into tougher subjects. But one of the things that I found working for the United Nations or working for other international human rights NGOs is that the work and the writing, the investigation, the writing that we do has been almost exclusively geared to changing policymakers' minds. And that's absolutely necessary. But I'll be very frank, I got really upset with policymakers. Look at the state of the world. I mean, we were presenting some pretty powerful information. I just remember investigating the genocide, the Rohingya genocide for the UN, giving policymakers very detailed evidence of crimes that had taken place or
Can
crime
I
or
interrupt you for just 1 second?
sure.
Would you explain what the Rohingya genocide is for people who don't know?
Sure. Oh, yeah. Thank you. So, in Myanmar, on the west coast of the country, is a state called Rakhine State. And for a very long time, it has been split into a de facto apartheid north and south. The north being populated by the minority Rohingya community, and the south being the majority Buddhist Rakhine community. For decades, the country as a whole had been discriminating against the Rohingya minority in this part of the country, which is near Bangladesh, just to give you some geography, and had seen them as enemies of the state almost. And in 20, for decades, they had created an apartheid system to push them out of the country, to make their lives so miserable they would leave. They prevented them from teaching their own language, eating their own foods in some cases. Massive waves of violence to push them out of the country had taken place over the course of decades. And then in 2017, a really big push to remove these people from the country happened, and led by the Myanmar military to push nearly 1 million Rohingya into Bangladesh, where they live now. And that's the UN formally classified that as a genocide in 2017. And I was investigating the early phases of that. But when I had evidence showing my bosses and policymakers, hey, listen, this is happening, they didn't really do very much, to be honest with you. And I saw that in other places as well, like Afghanistan, ways to prevent violence, very clear ways. Don't support warlords. This is what supporting warlords is gonna do in Afghanistan, and it's going to undermine the entire project of rebuilding the country. And I got incredibly frustrated with the slowness of policymakers, if not the outright ignorance of them in trying to actually put their money where their mouth was in terms of preventing and resolving deadly conflict. I just found diplomacy wasn't really working. And so one of the things that I wanted to do, even in a small way, was try to bring a broader group of people into this conversation. And so I had collected all these recipes and could see the stories that were telling about the Rohingya, about Bolivia and the drug war, about the Uyghurs in China, about the Tamils in Sri Lanka, communities that don't necessarily make it into the front page of the New York Times. And so I wanted to use food as a way to bring more people, the broader public, everyday people, into this topic, to understand the kind of the work that I did, and many of us like us do on this phone call, in order to build some compassion and traction in the public for change. And so that's one kind of like goal of the work that I've been doing around food and conflict. A second kind of goal of this was to push changes in international humanitarian law. One in particular is the crime of domicide. I'm not sure if many of you are familiar with it, but domicide is something that some academics and policymakers are trying to be included into the Rome Statute that governs international criminal court. And domicide is the intentional flattening of homes, of towns and villages, much like Mungdaw in Rakhine State, where the Rohingya live. Think Aleppo, think homes in Syria or Gaza today, in Palestine, even Beirut. I mean, this like intentional flattening. And like the reason why I think this has an intersection with food, and also it has an intersection with putting food on par with other forms of culture and getting food protected in conflict, is primarily because, let me start with the latter here. Why isn't food put on par with other forms of culture and getting the same protection in conflict? And that is largely because for millennia, it has been women and girls who are building our culinary culture. And that has the old rich white guys who wrote the rules of the laws of war, and what gets protected in war, didn't see food as having the same value as other forms of culture, because they were primarily done by women. So it was devalued and ignored. And so I think things are changing now, right? I think there's more appreciation of what food cultures can do, and how important they are to all of us. And I think if we're interested in protecting food culture, we're interested in food, we're interested in protecting food culture, we have to be interested in the people making our food cultures, and that's primarily women and girls. And women and girls bear the brunt of violence and conflict. And where do they spend most of their time? In kitchens and home kitchens, at their homes, in markets. And if those things are being intentionally flattened, think Gaza, Mungdaw, Aleppo, Homs, like it's incredibly hard to rebuild those food cultures afterwards. And it's not just about rebuilding food culture for the sake of it. It's because we see ourselves in our food cultures. Our cuisines are our language. It's a way for the elders that convey um, the community's values down to the younger generation. It's not just about how many food is not just about carrying calories. It's carrying cultural knowledge about different plants and animals that work together and grow together, the medicinal values of those things. And it really is about a community's cohesion and resilience and seeing themselves um, in their culture. So I think from it's a very easy, I mean, it's a fix for international law outlawing domicide. I also, from an international law perspective, one of the things that really struck me when I was researching this book was to the extent that the powerful, when they really want to destroy their enemy, will study their enemy's food culture. They will intentionally attack its food culture on purpose as a way to destroy them or erase them. And one of the cases that I outline in the book is what's happening with the Uyghur community in Western China. And for those who aren't very familiar with the Uyghurs, they are a Turkic Muslim ethnic group in far Western China on the border of Central Asia. And for decades, the Chinese Communist Party has tried to forcibly assimilate this Muslim minority group that has a very distinct visual and vibrant culture from kind of mainland Han culture. And the Chinese Communist Party has been trying very hard to integrate them into, forcibly assimilate them into broader kind of Chinese culture, erasing the language, erasing the religion, and even the food, because so much of Uyghur food is tied to its Islamic identity. And so they've been going pretty hard at trying to disconnect Uyghurs from their food cultures to the extent that, eating, if you're a Uyghur Muslim, abstaining from pork and alcohol is a sign of extremism for the Chinese Communist Party and a reason to intern you and torture you in the internment camps in the internment system they've set up. And they have gone after significant parts of Uyghur food culture in order to dismantle it, in order to erase the Uyghurs themselves. They have, right now they're taking Uyghur children from their homes, putting them in schools far away, forcing them to eat different foods, forcing them to speak another language, to basically erase the Uyghur identity out of them. I don't know if that sounds very familiar to many of you. It's what the United States did very successfully and criminally towards Native Americans here. Same in Canada, Australia, Japan did a similar thing. And so what's happening in China is a modern day analog of these other things with the boarding schools in Canada, the United States, and Australia. Maybe that sounds familiar to many of you. But, that is something that really surprised me. And I saw this in other places that I had worked. And I had researched the book about governments really kind of understanding the food culture. And I think going back to international humanitarian law, attacks on food culture, I think, can often presage attacks on people. In Gaza, for example, in Palestine more broadly, there have been real restrictions on what and how Palestinians eat long before October 7th. And I think, and if looking at the attacks on Uyghur food culture in China happened long before the internment camp system was built. And I think if we start looking at attacks on culture like this, we might be able to prevent attacks on people. And for some of you, that may sound a little bit familiar in the sense that's what Raphael Lemkin, who was a father of the Genocide Convention, really thought of when he was trying to define the crime of genocide. He really saw attacks on culture as presaging attacks on people. And so I think it's kind of imperative for us, if we're the conflict resolution community, to have a kind of a broader and as well as a more tactile more tools in our toolbox in order to look at kind of genocide prevention and conflict and violence prevention. And so I think that, the 10 stages of genocide, something that genocide experts often use to determine whether a genocide is unfolding, incorporating attacks on food culture could be one of them. So yeah, I mean, from an IHL and human rights perspective, in terms of kind of policy changes, those are the kinds of things that I would like to see. And I think food can help us see that.
It's a wonderful context to talk about. I know that it is considered a crime, for instance, to hit cultural icons in international humanitarian law. Like they cut off the Mostar Bridge, which the Mostar Bridge was used by both sides, by Muslims and Christians, crossing over constantly with each other. There was no war between them. There was intermarriage, and then the war happened, and they demoralized an entire city by bombing the Mostar Bridge. And
Jill, sorry.
With it eliminated so much. No, please go ahead.
No, Jill, that reminds me of something. I'm glad you brought that up, because the way that international human rights law works right now is when it comes to the weaponization of food, it looks at mostly using the starvation, the denial of food and sees that as a crime. But I think, going back to the Uyghur example, what is happening in that case, in many ways, the Chinese Communist Party is forcing Uyghurs to eat pork, to drink alcohol, which goes against their Islamic identity. And to be clear here, for Uyghurs, you cannot untangle their Uyghur identity from their Islamic identity. They're the one and the same. And so force feeding people to eat foods that aren't part of their culture, to force feed Uyghur children a non-Uyghur diet and culture, I think also has to be thought about in a criminal context too. So, it's not just the denial of food, but it's the forcing of someone into a new culture, that forced assimilation in some ways, that I think has to be taken more seriously in international human rights law.
Thank you, Michael. And also, you have some wonderful photographs. I'm wondering if you'd be willing to show them.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, just to give you some context of what we were talking about, and just so you see some of the people and the food that I was talking about. I don't know if you can share that now.
Yeah, can I share that right now? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
go ahead. I'll walk you through them before we get to questions and tell you what they are. Okay, so this is the cover of my book. The next slide is just me in high school, because it started off with high school, and that's what I looked like then. I don't know if do I switch them or do
Karina,
you switch?
can you move it? Yeah. Can you move it to the next slide?
Oh, okay. So that's okay.
We missed Karina. Can we show him in high school? Do you have that picture?
I do. Let me see if I showed it. Can you guys still see my screen?
Yeah, but I can explain this one.
The food. Yeah.
Oh, that's me. High school.
There you go.
Can you see still?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. The next one is of Keiko, who was at that Japanese izakaya where I learned to cook for 2 years. And the following two pictures are the fried chicken that she taught me how to make. That's in the book, that recipe. So if you go to the next slide. Would you be willing to
go to the next slide, Karina, after the high school one?
Okay.
I think it's skipping over. Anyway.
Yeah, it seems like it's not when I go into presentation. Oh, here it is. When I show present in Teams, it's not showing it. So I guess I have to just do it from here.
Show slideshow. Click on slideshow and it will show it. See the one up on the left where it says slideshow record?
Yeah, like
click on slideshow.
Hold on one second. I don't. Oh, right there. Okay, 1 second. Drum currents.
That'll help.
Can you see?
It's okay. Let's just get to the pictures that we can. This is fine. Oh yeah. So this is the karaage. this is a really beautiful fried chicken that Keiko had, who's in the book where I was talking about in Japan, how she taught me to cook, but I also had the realization. I saw about language in my father and wanting to learn more about that. Yeah, I mean, there's a variety of other pictures in there we can get to, but if it's hard to share, we
No,
can
I
just.
think I figured it out. I just had to share
Okay.
it in Teams. Yeah. So
Great.
let
Would
me,
you be willing to do that,
yeah,
Karina?
one
Go for it.
second. Okay.
Yeah.
It's just
I've learned to
loading.
be patient, Michael, because
Yeah.
I am so technologically challenged. I rely on Karina so much.
Okay. Okay, let me go back. Let me get out of this.
Okay.
And then PowerPoint Live. I'm gonna stop sharing for a sec, guys.
No worries.
Did it already stop sharing? Okay.
It did.
Yeah, it
Okay.
stopped sharing quite a while ago.
Okay.
And in fact, if anybody has a question to ask Michael while we're waiting for the slideshow presentation, would you be willing to ask it? Raise your hand or just come off mute and ask any question or make a comment about what he's just talked about. Feel free. This is your time. Lacey, John, go ahead, John.
Yeah, hey, thanks for giving us a little bit of your life story and the background for the book. I actually went to Amazon and tried to look at a few like pages, but it wouldn't let me go too far. But I was wondering if there was like maybe a short passage with a lead into one of the recipes that you wanted to we might want to read.
Oh, let's see. I can do. Yeah, I'm happy to. I'm happy to do a little reading if you want me to. Um, sure. Yeah, let me find. I have right here. So here's the head note from Salande Nahud. And for those this is the recipe that really kind of sparked the idea for this book. It is this Afghan chickpea curry that I asked my friend Tamim if it was Afghan and kind of set me on this journey to understand how violence was changing food culture. And for those of you who may not be able to have access to the book, this recipe is on the New York Times cooking app. The New York Times Magazine wrote about it a few months ago, and as a way to preserve it for posterity, they put this recipe on the app. So if you guys have that subscription, you can find it. So this is called Tamim Salande Nahud, and here's the head note for the recipe. This is Tamim's recipe for Salande Nahud, the richly spiced chickpea dish I ate at his Kabul home in the summer of 2007 that sparked the idea for this book. Here I am serving with rice, but on the evening, I scooped up the stew with pieces of Afghan naan. Wheat is among Afghan's largest cereal crops, and stacks of wheat naan appear at nearly every local baker and sit alongside dishes at nearly at every Afghan meal. Although Afghan naan is made in a tandoor like other versions in Central South Asia, it differs in shapes and textures and taste. Afghan naan is long, sometimes up to 2 feet, and slightly thicker than most other versions in the region. Oh, yeah. So that'll give you a little taste of what the recipe head notes are like. Each chapter starts with a story of a dish or an ingredient that is being threatened or being brought back, and you follow the family or the chef or the human rights activist who's trying to keep the food alive in real time. And through them, you get to see how the violence has shaped their lives and how they're responding to it. And at the and you get the recipe at the end that they share with us as a gift. But what I really like about a lot of this stuff is that while this book is about how violence changes cuisine, it's really kind of really giving us tools, everyday tools on how to kind of cope with and live with difficult political moments. I thought, I know it sounds trite, but it's not. Cooking is a really profound way to kind of stave off surrender, I find, and gives you a way to think about another part of the world for a second, or to show or feel or to be in solidarity with other people in times of crisis. So, and I learned so many different ways at food through these people that I met, and you'll meet hopefully in this book if you get it. Um, Not only ways to like live through and cope with the violence, but ways to survive and thrive through it. Right? There's a lot of lessons for us in this book. So thank you for that question.
Michael, did you
Yeah.
want me to show, because the file of the presentation, it's a little bit just too old to be able to share it to team, so I can just go down the pictures like
Yeah,
this.
whichever pictures you can get show up, I can explain them.
Okay, sounds good. So I can go to the next one. I don't think we saw that one.
So that's Keiko, much older now. I think we missed the first one of her. But
Is it? Oh, this one right here.
yes, that's Keiko, who taught me how to cook and learn Japanese in her izakaya. That is then.
And then this is the chicken that she.
The chicken. That's the making of it, the finished version, and then her and I more recently connecting 25 years later, last year. So that's her on the far, on my right. So yeah, or I'm sorry, my left in that picture. And this is just me. I was doing some interviews in Mali after the Al Qaeda offshoot had taken over northern parts of Mali, and so I went up there to interview eyewitnesses to different aspects of the violence. And similarly, these are just just working. Just what This is me in Bolivia. This is me in Afghanistan, in Capisa, and just giving you shots of some of the stuff that's actually in the book a little bit as well. And you can scroll down. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them. More Afghanistan.
What's the one just before this one with the one before this one?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
These are just children. I was in Afghanistan working for Human Rights Watch, and I went to go investigate a series of schools that the Taliban had burned down. They were clearly, as we all know, again, not very fond of people being educated. And burning down schools is a war crime in that context. And these are just some of the children who are now, that tree had become their school, while the physical building that you'll see in the next picture is being rebuilt.
Got it.
Yeah.
Next picture.
Those are some of the children. Yeah. Yeah, this is just more Afghanistan as well. The next picture is of Tamim. So this is Tamim, who I had that conversation with, who kind of opened my eyes to how wars, occupations, genocide, violence changes our food cultures, and how they really narrow our language of food, and the importance of keeping them alive. And the next picture is of that Salande Nahud, that really beautiful chickpea curry. It's vegetarian. It's fantastic. And you can eat it any time of year. It's one of my favorite things to eat. And like I said, it's on the New York Times cooking app right now. The next pictures of Sri Lanka. This is just a really wonderful picture I took. I love it. It was during a Hindu festival, but this is at a time when I was investigating war crimes toward the end of the Sri Lankan Civil War, 2009, 10, 8, 9, 10. And this, and there's a chapter of this in the book, which looks at how this really beautiful crab curry called Nandu curry, which is the jewel in the crown of Elam Tamil cuisine. Elam Tamils live in the northern and eastern part of Sri Lanka, and many of these civilians are caught in between the Tamil Tigers and the Sri Lankan army fighting a civil war. And one of their really beautiful crab curries is dish was almost lost because the Sri Lankan military had blockaded the northern eastern parts of the island, a naval blockade, so Tamil fishermen couldn't go out to fish. And it was one of those situations where the Sri Lankan Navy kind of asked questions, or they put the blockade up to prevent guns and people from moving in and out of the country. And they basically sank fishing boats. There was a bit of shoot first, ask questions later. And a lot of Tamil fishermen were just too scared to go out to fish. So the community turned inland for its protein. And this really beautiful dish just got incredibly hard to make. And after a generation, some people were forgetting how to make it. And so we can go to the next slide. And it's the story is about kind of bringing that curry back.
I ask you a question. What are the
Sure.
little red things that they have in their hands?
Oh, they're eating popsicles.
Oh, how fun.
Yeah, it's a really, really fun picture. The next one, this is northern Sri Lanka. This is the fishing boats after the war. Next slide is just this blue swimmer crab, which is a staple of Sri Lankan crab cuisine. The crab curry is coming back, but coincidentally, while the war was being fought, different parts of the world developed taste for seafood and got richer. And so after the war was over, Elam Tamil started trying to cook again, and particularly this crab curry, but so much of the good crab was being exported to different parts of the world. So it's now pricing them out of their own cuisine in many ways. It's kind of like, it's a bit of a conundrum for them. And it's one of the impacts you can see of violence having kind of a long tail. Even after the war is over, you can have different consequences affecting food culture. And I think the next picture will be of that actual crab curry. Yeah, this is it. Sorry, it's not the greatest picture, but it is a beautiful, wonderful crab curry. And this woman, Rajiva, gave me her family recipe for it, and it's in the book. And it's a wonderful, wonderful curry that tells a great story. The next pictures are about Bangladesh. This is Cox's Bazar, a little north of where many of the Rohingya refugees who were forced to flee their home into Bangladesh. Now 1 million live there. I'm gonna go to the next picture. Yeah, this is the precariousness in which the Rohingya live in these camps. This is actually a cooking fire that started and spread to all the bamboo shanties. The Bangladesh government does not allow the Rohingya to work. They do not allow them to build more permanent structures because they don't want them to stay in the country. It's kind of denying the fact of reality that the Rohingya are probably not going home in a very long time. And so there's this unspoken strategy to make their lives miserable, so they leave in different ways. It's quite profound. But part of this is cooking fires. This is a consequence of not building more permanent shelters. And we can see in the next slide how cramped a kitchen can be. And this is how Rohingya are forced to cook, and they can see it can catch an entire shanty shelter on fire and spread throughout the entire camp. And so it's a very precarious thing in which, something that should be a human right becomes cooking, which should be a human right. I mean, becomes a really dangerous thing for a lot of people. Yeah, so the next slide. I mean, this is a meal that I had in Rohingya camp, and it's probably one of the most meaningful meals I've had in my life. Even in kind of their desperate situation, feeding a guest like me was something that connected them to their culture, their identity, their hospitality. Hospitality is something that is so ingrained in so many cultures, and expressing that is a really important thing. And it really, in this moment, kind of reminded them that they were Rohingya again, as this woman, and her name is Mariam, in this picture told me. So it's a really important thing. The next picture is this beautiful beef curry. This is one that I made. It's a recipe in the book that was shared with me. It's a beef curry. It's called gorugoso. It is a really fiery, delicious, luscious beef curry that in many ways is like that crab curry that I talked about with the Elam Tamils in Sri Lanka. It's disappearing because it's incredibly hard for the Rohingya to make it because so much of their land has been stolen from them, and their cows have been stolen from them in the course of the genocide and violence. If you can't have land, you can't graze cows. If you can't have cows, you can't have beef. And so it's getting to be almost impossible for Rohingya to make this very special dish for them. Now it's become a luxury when it used to become when it was a daily part of their cuisine. We can go to the next one. Yeah. So this, I mean, I'm happy to take any questions. If there are any, you can interrupt anytime, please. Just this is another. This is coca leaf. The ancient sacred plant, which has been more recently bastardized to make cocaine. It is this chapter in the book is looking at Bolivia and the Andes and the impact of the drug war on Bolivian and Andean cuisine. In a way, it looks at kind of what happens when the violence ends and what happens when peace kind of takes hold after a pretty traumatic time, and the ingenuity and creativity of chefs and cooks who are mostly women in a place like Bolivia. And here, well, coca leaf has been used for eons as a tea and to chew, and they brewed it for sacred ceremonies. You really have these like creative young contemporary cooks who are cooking with coca leaf now, as a way to destigmatize a sacred special plant, to destigmatize it from cocaine and the drug war, but also to show its culinary properties. It's really nutritious plant. Go ahead.
And one of the things I was going to say, if you visit Peru and you go to Machu Picchu and you go to Cusco, they serve you coca tea
Yeah,
to help you with altitude sickness.
exactly.
And the people that live up in the mountains chew on it with a little bit of charcoal so that they don't get lightheaded when they have to climb mountains and they don't
Yeah.
have dizziness. And it
Well,
keeps them from starving when they have long distances to go. So it
exactly.
isn't cocaine.
No,
It
it's
isn't
not at
like
all.
the cocaine industry. Yeah.
It's not at all. And you will hear often a coca leaf farmers, and just everyone in general will talk about, like, you can chew as many grapes as you can eat as many grapes as you can, and you won't get drunk, right? Just like for wine. It's the same thing with coca leaf. You can chew as many coca leaves as you can, you're not going to get high. Like, it's just a completely different thing, culturally and
I
chemically.
sorry to cut you off, but I
Oh,
remember having some coca tea when I visited Peru, and I do remember getting a little energy from
yeah.
it.
It's a better
Good
version of
energy,
espresso.
clean. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And so the next slide, we can go to the next one. These are coca
Say,
farmers.
Michael, if I may interrupt for a minute.
Please.
I'm from Iran. My family came from Khark, which is the northeast corner
Okay.
of Iran, Afghanistan. I could have waited until the end of the presentation to compliment you, but I can't wait. I couldn't wait.
Okay,
So
I'll take it.
thank you so much for what you do. And you're right on the spot. I mean, I feel the same way about Persian food. I can't tell you how many miles I go for Persian food.
Yeah. One of the great
My
cuisines of the
family
world.
lives in Salt Lake, and I make sure I go there all the time. And after 25 years of being here, I cook for myself, and I'll tell you, at least 3 or 4 times a week, I cook. I mean, mine is not elegant, but it's Persian food. So I quite relate to what you're saying, and I'm quite happy that I had this opportunity to listen to you. Thank you so much for
Oh,
what
no,
you do.
thank you. No, thank you. I love hearing that. Thank you. That means a lot.
I was going to also mention in the chat, Bridget Garley has talked about, let me see. Bridget, did you want to unmute and say what you were going to say?
Yes, hi. Sorry, let me take the camera. Yeah, what up? Hi, hello. Very interesting. Actually, tonight I'm going for food at the Pakistani restaurant with friends. So
like
just
people.
so yeah, I was writing because I worked I was based in the camp in Cox's Bazar for 18 months, so I know
Oh,
what you're
wow.
going through. But I was saying in the chat that the American Red Cross in the camps in Bangladesh have the lead in supporting the Bangladesh Red Crescent in disaster prevention. So, and that because I had put that comment right after you show us the fire. So they have the teams locally with the Bangladesh Red Crescent and the residents of the camps with different quads, you know how they're set up to go and do all the preventions and everything. And fires is one of
Yeah.
the really, really risky ones. And we've all had issues there. So, but it's interesting because it's the American Red Cross in that, you know, where all the different Red Crosses work. And at the time I was incestuous, had joined the Canadian Red Cross, but still, yeah,
Thank you
so I
for your
wanted
work.
to, yeah, thank you, you too. So very interesting. I love it. So congratulations on how you came up with your theory and it really talks to my heart. So thank you so much. I appreciate. Congratulations.
Thank you, Bridget. That means a lot. Thank you. Coming from you,
Take
yes.
take care. I'm gonna
Take care.
shut down now. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
What's the photograph, Michael?
Oh, so here, this photograph is of cocoa farmers. It's just you can see what a cocoa field looks like and how much is grown in Bolivia across these mountains. You can see on the far side some cocoa fields. But the next picture is actually a culinary use of cocoa. This is something that some young chefs in La Paz, one named Marcia Taha, she is using cooking with coca leaf as a way to destigmatize it, and also show its like really wonderful culinary uses. And these are deep fried coca leaves, almost like a Japanese tempura, that are like stay or kind of being held up by a coca leaf infused brown butter. And it was one of the most fantastic things I've ever had to eat. And one of the things that really got me about this is, you know, I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and you know, I just remember we were browbeaten over the head about the drug war and cocaine and don't use drugs. And just as a little kid, you were scared about it, and you know, in many ways, rightly so. Um, but what this dish does, it forces you to kind of confront the stigma head on by just eating this pure coca leaf, and you see right away that it's actually not. It's not a violent plant. It is not a drug, and it's the context that's around food that makes it either good or terrible politically. So it's a really kind of fascinating and culturally engaging and really delicious food. And I suggest if you ever go to La Paz, I think some of the most interesting cooking is going on there right now. The next picture. So yeah, this is a chapter that it didn't make it into the book. And I wish I was able to do it, but Cambodia was a chapter I really wanted to put in for time and resources. I couldn't get it finished in time, but it's a really wonderful thing and a good example of, you know, a conflict. The Khmer Rouge had when the genocide took place in the 1970s, the Khmer Rouge went into Phnom Penh and they killed all of basically the artists, the chefs, the musicians. If they didn't kill them, they forced them into the countryside. I mean, they really were attacking the culture, the city, the urban culture of Cambodia. And it was a genocide that was based on starvation. It was a genocide of food was real tight nexus to this genocidal event, and so many people were starved to death. So many people were killed and had died, and so many people took their culinary culture with them to the grave. And this is a chef, Tim Feek, who's in Phnom Penh right now, and he is one of these young archaeologist chefs who are going back and talking to the elders to help rebuild a cuisine that was nearly extinguished. And so this is just him. We can go to some other pictures. And this is his new restaurant. And this is the next page. It's called Baisaw. And this is just like, this is a beautiful, I just love this. It was like this beautiful fresh watermelon salad, which, a very simple thing, was not something that's being made anymore. It's an old traditional Cambodian dish that, that the memory of it was nearly disappeared by the violence. And you can just see how fragile, to me, it just demonstrated how fragile memory can be, and how traumatic violence can be, and shaping our culture and disappearing it. But also like the love that, the Cambodians have for their cuisine and trying to really bring it back. It's a really quite a remarkable thing. And, you know, like La Paz, I think there's some really fantastic food being cooked right now, which is in some ways kind of this Back to the Future cuisine. We can go to the next slide. Again, here's just these are pictures of young Rohingya women in Turkey. They were forced out of Western China by the genocide that's happening there. And this is a school that is helping young women understand their Uyghur culture. And one of the, besides language and science and geography and arithmetic, they have culinary courses as well. And so this is one, they're just making they're making this really beautiful dish. It's called naren. It is like for an American reference, it's like chicken noodle soup, but it's a thing that kind of will cure a cold and mend a broken heart, which is the next slide, this really beautiful dish that they're making. They were rolling the dough to make those noodles. And we can go to the next slide. This is Uyghur naan. This is really kind of the bakers, Uyghur bakers, are central to Uyghur culture. Like many cultures, the bakers are where, at the bakery is where kind of the community meets every day, right? It's where gossip takes place, where neighbors catch up. No one eats a meal. There's a lot of culinary cultures which like naan, the bread is a staple, and it's eaten at every meal. And the bakers are kind of central to community life in Uyghur culture, and they were targeted by the Chinese Communist Party because they were a sign of indigenous Uyghur culture, native Uyghur culture. Like it was an independent expression of their identity, and they wanted to kind of strip it down. And so they started arresting and interning the bakers on purpose as a way to remove that everyday cultural reference in Uyghur life. The next picture, this is just a really wonderful chef I met in Istanbul, where you have a lot of Uyghurs living now who are trying to kind of recreate their culture and keep it alive in Turkey. And it's a really wonderful place. There's a kebab maker who's making a very special kebab from Kashgar. And you find and this is a kind of a story of diaspora in some ways, as where the diaspora is a very powerful way of keeping communities connected to the cultures and culture alive. I often find that in certain diaspora communities, you find some of the oldest traditions still surviving, and they're a way for they're kind of a memory bank, and a way for culture to be replanted and reseeded when communities can go home after war. So there's a lot of my book talks about the very critical, important role that diasporas play, and the communication between kind of the homeland and diaspora, and even some of the tensions that exist sometimes. But it's a really kind of powerful way to, I think, with the Uyghur community in particular in Turkey, is like a really, it shows a really kind of the salience of diasporas. I think we can go to the next one. This is New Mexico, a little closer to home here in the United States. One of the chapters of my book, as an American, I needed to talk about how I like America's own violence, right? And I think I needed to take a look at that in a very specific way, and I looked at the contemporary impacts of U.S. policy on indigenous culture here in the United States. I mean, I think it's important to say about my book is that I really tried to show how violence was affecting culinary traditions in almost real time. I didn't really want to go back, to Genghis Khan running across the steppe. I wanted you to be able to see, feel, and taste the change in real time. And so even while much of the physical violence that has taken the attacks, the kind of the military violence against Native Americans happened a long time ago, the contemporary impacts are quite profound and still stealing indigenous culture from many nations here in the US. But it's also, I wanted to tell the story of the persistence of survival and these native communities, particularly the Pueblo nations in New Mexico, who are trying to bring back old parts of their cuisine and plants that many had lost the kind of day-to-day memory and how to grow. And so this chapter, as the next slide, is about amaranth and this Spanish who outlawed it when they invaded Mexico City, in the fifth one was it's 500 years ago. But yeah, the Spanish banned the use of amaranth, and I'm not going to give the story away. You have to read the book. But they banned it as they moved north. As the Spanish moved north, they banned amaranth, and into New Mexico, it was banned as well. And now it's a story of kind of the regeneration of this really wonderful plant that has a very intimate relationship with humans, and the Pueblo nations and them bringing it back. And it's really used. It's a very protein-rich plant. It's like quinoa. It's a pseudo cereal, but it's one of the most protein-dense plants on the planet. And this is amaranth. You can see the kind of beautiful colors. This is one that I grew on my deck in Brooklyn. The next slide is one in the wild. Oh, yeah, this one. They can change color depending on where it is. And they can grow up to like 7, 8 feet tall. They're kind of these really floppy flowers, and they really love humans. These plants always seem to bend in your direction as you're walking by. But each of those little finger flowers contains hundreds, if not thousands, of little black or white seeds that you grind up into a powder to make a flour or a masa, and you can make tortillas out of it, or you can make other dishes out of it. But when you mix corn and amaranth flour together, it becomes a complete protein. And so some culinary historians believe that amaranth was kind of the original, or the corn and amaranth together were one of the first tortilla recipes. And the next slide is of Marian Naranjo, an elder at the Santa Clara Pueblo, grinding amaranth into on a traditional grinding stone into amaranth flour, amaranth masa. And the next slide is, these are these beautiful corn tortilla, amaranth and blue corn tortillas that they made. And I made some tacos out of them one night. And the next slide is of Marianne and her son, Ray. And Ray is this really wonderful Pueblo chef who first introduced me to the story of amaranth and its legacy, but also both he and his mother are working to really bring back pre-Columbian, pre-colonial Pueblo cuisine. And they're just wonderful people who cook some really wonderful food. And they're some of the best human rights activists I ever met. So yeah, those are just some of the stories that are in the last sweet bite. And if there's any other questions, I'm happy to take them.
There was a comment,
Sure.
Michael, in the chat. Bridget, do you want to unmute again?
In the chat.
C'est moi again. Yeah, what I was saying, Michael, when you were doing all the herbal presentation in Haiti, and there was the Swiss Red Cross actually was working with the Haitian Red Cross in the mountains just above Port-au-Prince to revitalize, as we say in French, I don't know,
No,
the growth of all the herbs to help, people to keep that culture for healing purposes and also to feed families so that it would not always depend on, on help, external help as we do through the feeding programs. But the fact that they kept that, and I think it was really, really important. And it goes also towards what you're saying that, during civil unrest or wars or different situation, that the food culture is a bit lost and people don't, we lose the knowledge of what the purpose of food is as well, to bring people together and some healing situations. Voilà, c'est tout. I'm going back to, I'm going to add more comments maybe later.
Okay, happy to hear them.
Thank you. Thank you, Jill.
Anybody
Bye-bye.
has any more questions? Thank you, Bridget, again.
You're welcome,
but
Jill.
if anybody has any questions for Michael, this is the time to ask them in their last few minutes. Feel free to raise your hand or unmute and share your comments with Michael. Hello? There's somebody that says test, but I don't know what that is. Oh. Okay. Thank you. Somebody said, thank you so much for this amazing, let's see. For this amazing talk. Let's see. For this amazing, so many are happening in the chat. Thank you so much for this amazing talk. What a creative way to share cultural recipes. I'm looking forward to purchasing your book. I'm buying multiple to give as gifts to others. And then it says,
oh, that's so kind. Thank you.
It says, thank you, Michael. This presentation was enlightening. And have a good day. And then give us the name of the book again, please.
It is The Last Sweet Bite.
And somebody said, thank you. Look forward to reading your book. So exciting for your book. Thank you. Lots of thank yous. Wonderful presentation. They learned a lot. And this is really exciting, Michael. I am so excited that there were so many people on and that really enjoyed this.
Thank you for having me.
Any last minute questions? Let me check. I'm going to check and see if there's anything last. Just a lot of thank yous in the chat. And a lot of hearts as well.
Well, no, this is really wonderful. Thank you. It was an honor to be part of this. I'm a big fan of the Red Cross.
2 or 3 more seconds, and then we'll close the chat. And Michael, if you can stay on for a couple minutes, that would be great.
Great, no problem.
I wanted to tell you, we're going to send a recording to you of Michael's talk today next week. So you should be receiving it. It'll be a YouTube presentation, so you can access it that way. And just so many thank yous. I don't even know if there's a question amidst all of them. Last opportunity to ask Michael a question before we stop this recording. Anybody? All right, goodbye, dear fellows. Thank you so much for participating. We'll send out a newsletter for next month about who's speaking, but I'm so grateful.